Hello, Brazil, and hello, Phoenix Institute. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. I know the work you're doing. You had explained it all to me, and I find it incredibly fascinating. And I know that you have a lot of people who are really interested in what you're doing. And I know some of the people who've been on your program too. So I'm excited to be here, and I thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, John. We've been talking about remote viewing for quite a while, and I'm so excited to talk to someone who's been working with it for over 2 decades. So I'd like to start recapping your story, because not everybody knows you well. So could you tell us, how did you end up working with remote viewing in the mid-90s? How did it happen?
Well, okay, so I went to school and I have a degree in fine art.
Oh.
Like, I was never in the military. I was never involved in any of that stuff. But in 1995, I had seen a TV news report on remote viewing. And that was the first time that it was outed to the public of this psychic technique, this technology to create psychic spies. And I never thought of myself as being psychic to that point. I mean, every single one of us has had a psychic experience, whether we know it or not. And I know I had had that kind of stuff before. And I had been very involved in meditation, Zen meditation, and I lived in a Zen center for a while meditating. Yeah. So I was really interested in this idea of psychic spies. It was like, if you hear the word psychic spy, it's like this, I don't know, just this obsessive ticking in your head starts happening. Psychic spy, what's that? I have to figure this out. So it was at that time that after it became declassified, there were ex-military trainers. They were already teaching remote viewing, but I think it was like $10,000 US dollars to take a course. I didn't have that. I mean, I was a starving artist, so I didn't have that kind of money. So I was able to kind of cobble together how to do it through some internet forums. People were talking about it here and there. So I was able to figure it out a little bit, and then I tried it myself, and it was working. It really, really worked. So I eventually, it wasn't long after, that was probably a year or so, I got formal training in it. Now, I did not want to be trained by an ex-military person. I went to a person named Prudence Calabrese, who was working with a place called the Farsight Institute. And that's a remote viewing institute in the United States. So she had broken off with them, and then I started to work with her. And it was in that period of time where everybody in the civilian world was trying to figure out, what can we do with remote viewing? I mean, everyone's viewing conspiracy and alien stuff and all that, but what can we do with it on the practical side in order to make a living? So we formed a think tank, and we had an investor come in, and we hired and trained remote viewers. And because of that, we were brought into some United States intelligence projects. We had worked with corporations, major household name corporations, in order to figure out like future technologies, in order to understand how we can fix things in product lines. I mean, we worked with companies in Hollywood to understand like what kind of movies would be hits, like stories. We would remote view stories that would be hits and then give them the information. We worked on an alien toy, a toy that aliens play with for a toy company. I mean, the projects were pretty much endless, endless. And all the while, we had a fully functioning, running civilian think tank. And all the while, the whole time, even though we were working with people in intelligence world, and we had handlers in various intelligence agencies, which is a little sketchy to begin with, but there was another covert group from, the government or some government that was trying to shut us down. So we had a lot of death threats from this group. We were followed all the time.
From the beginning?
More or less from the very beginning.
Wow.
From the very beginning. And it was a weird thing. It was a very strange situation to me because, remote viewing was declassified. And so that means it goes to the public, and the public can do whatever it wants with it. Yet at the same time, we're being like harassed, and all they want us to do is shut down, go away. And after 9/11 in the United States, when the terrorist attack happened, we started working counter-terror for the FBI. And I thought, because of that situation, that other side would let up, but it got worse. It got more intense. So, eventually what happened was we had to shut our doors. We had to close down this particular aspect of the business called transdimensional systems, the running thing. And that basically stopped that type of harassment. But then I went on, my partner Prudence in the business quit and disappeared. And I went on working on television shows like Ancient Aliens and National Geographic and stuff like that. So that, there's something really important about this, about remote viewing. It is something that can change the consciousness of humanity in general, because it's not what people think it is. I mean, there is an information gathering side of remote viewing, and it's scientific in the process, and I can explain that. But outside of that, in order to be an effective remote viewer, you have to go through a process of letting go of your ideas about things and moving to a different place inside of you where you can sense and feel, as opposed to think about it. The thinking brain is the thing that comes to conclusions on things, and you have to let go of the thinking brain in order to truly know what's there and what's happening. And it's the same with any deep spiritual practice. Like if you're sitting on a cushion in the Zen center all day, all you're doing is trying to get out of your head so that you can see what's truly happening. Because it's our brain, it's our mind that creates our suffering. Our thinking mind creates our suffering, and it creates a self-identity of who we think we are, which gets in the way of truly knowing what is. And so remote viewing is really a process. Even though there's the information and the amazing stories that come out of it, it is a process to let go of aspects of yourself so that you can truly see what is there. Now, it's not necessarily a spiritual practice, but it has the roots and the underpinnings of it, right?
It is, right? It's like a spiritual practice, which you give another excuse for, but the end goal is the same. And you evolve spiritually, even though you're not officially doing it for that reason, right?
Right, exactly.
I understand what you're saying, because as an engineer, I used to be super linear thinking, logical and things like that. And at the same time, I had this crazy psychic activity and I didn't know how to deal with that. And it took me over 2 decades to come to the point where I say, okay, sometimes I need to use my logical brain to get better and to understand what I received of information from the other side of my brain, which is non-linear and usually comes with better answers. So so that's how I do it today with the Akashic Records. I open myself to receive the answers. I have no idea what's going to come. I don't even guess, because I've embarrassed myself enough times trying to guess. I don't anymore. But then I use my linear brain to understand the information I receive. So that's pretty much how I work it.
Exactly. Okay, so the whole the story of the ages, the epochal ages, like in Hindu, the Kali Yuga, and there's 4 epochal ages that they claim humans have gone through. And just about every culture across this planet has these epochal ages, and they amount to about 4 or 5, where it starts with the Golden Age. The Greeks had it, the Golden Age, and it moves to the Silver, and then the Bronze, and then the Iron Age. And these ages are very massive amounts of time, and they're supposed to represent a whole cycle. Okay, so we remote viewed the heck out of these ages. And one of the things, so when you go back to the Golden Age was like an age where people were living and they could just get food from the earth. It was easy. There was no toiling. They were connected to each other in a very psychic, telepathic way. They were connected to source. They lived connected to source. And then as you go to the Silver Age, things start to devolve a bit. And then the Iron Age, it devolves more. People get more greedy. They get more into themselves and their own self-satisfaction. They lose their connection to divinity. Okay. Mm-hmm. We're in the last age right now, according to this time frame, in the Iron Age. And in the Iron Age, truths become lies and lies become truths. Wow. So, and it's an age of wars. Now, when we looked at the Golden Age and how people lived, it was literally intuition first, logic second. So the big difference between that and this right now is that people use logic first and intuition second. And that is why people believe the lies.
Exactly.
And they cannot feel the truth. So what you're doing is bringing back something from the Golden Age, because I truly believe that we are moving back into that. Mm-hmm. Truly believe we're moving back into that. And that is a huge aspect of it. And that is so important for our world right now, to understand how to shift it around. We put intuition first and then let our logic figure out the path that the intuition gave us. So what you're doing is just...
Yeah, perfect. And I think it's the perfect way to navigate all the disinformation ocean we have around. Because if we use our intuition, what we feel, it's instantaneous. We know when we're being lied to.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if we try to figure out with our logical minds, we can have very elaborate lies,
right?
And we can fall for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you didn't work much with the FBI and all that, officially psychic spying, counter-terrorism and all that. But I assume that after a while, with both sides of, let's say, the Americans and the Russians, when the whole remote viewing started, when both sides are doing the same thing, probably someone thought about creating fences or psychic defenses and things like that. How does it work? Is it possible to block the remote viewing or send it somewhere else in some way?
Absolutely. So one of the things about humans and remote viewing is that the normal average human can't really block that kind of thing, because for one thing, they don't have the awareness that somebody would be remote viewing them. And another thing, they don't have the energetic capacity necessarily to move a remote viewer out if they come into them. So other beings absolutely do. So there are beings that we've run across, and it actually happens quite a bit. You know, the whole alien or multidimensional construct. When you remote view those types of beings, they will notice when you're remote viewing them. And if they have things to hide, then they can block you. And normally it's a case of basically just sending you somewhere else other than them. For instance, there was a video called Skinny Bob, and you can find it on YouTube. Skinny Bob was an alien. And there was this video that was released to YouTube a while ago, and we had remote viewed that video. And when we started remote viewing Skinny Bob, it was, well, first we just wanted to figure out if it was a real thing or some CGI, some computer trickery or whatever. Turns out it is real, according to our data. And Skinny Bob at first would allow the remote viewers in and go into his mind and, you know, explain what's going on. But then after about 3 or 4 viewers and a couple sessions in, he started bouncing them out because he got irritated with the viewers constantly going into them and just basically sending them to a nature scene. So that happens. Now, on the other side of it, there are like hidden military installations across the world, across this planet, that have to do with alien involvement. Mm-hmm. And when remote viewers view those, quite a few of them have what we call viewer traps, where you'll start viewing it and you'll kind of get sucked into this just energetic matrix that it feels like you're going somewhere, but you never actually end up anywhere and get any information. And it's meant to just sort of like, it's like an energy field. It's like a fourth dimensional energy field that traps psychics who are going in to look at these locations.
Wow.
We've also run across locations where when the viewers go in, they start to hear alarm sounds. So there's like there's an energetic field that when breached can set off alarms. Now that energetic field is more fourth dimensional than it is three-dimensional. But I've done some experiments building like static electricity devices, stuff that ghost hunters use. And some remote viewing of these devices will set them off. And of course, it's like, fine tuning that kind of thing. I'm sure that somebody has, on the terrestrial 3D Earth side. But in anything that I would do to figure it out would be kind of reinventing the wheel. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Super interesting. Because I've been attacked once. I think I've been when I think I was seeing a dark fleet ship over Argentina, but I didn't even know I was seeing that. The only thought I had in the moment was, whoa, if I ever had a UFO, I would hide it in a cloud. And I was seeing something weird metallic in the middle of a cloud, but I wasn't thinking of taking a photo or anything like that. But I only thought that, and the next second, bam, huge headache. And I had to sleep for 2 hours to go back to my normal. And only later I said, whoa, I think that was real. For what reason I would have this major headache out of the blue?
Yeah, this happens all the time. This is common. This is more common than you know. And especially with someone like you who's going into this world and has this show, these beings are always around and they're always watching and they're always monitoring and they're always looking for ways to push you back, to turn you off. I'm sure you've had experiences that you've completely forgotten about too, because they will wipe them from your memory.
Yeah, sometimes. But it's usually like that. I feel bad. I have a headache or I feel stomach ache or something like that. That's usually the sign, there's something weird here.
Right.
Wow. My last question actually was about the if when remote viewing upper dimensional or extraterrestrial beings, you are usually noticed or not. And what do you do when they notice you?
It depends on who you're viewing. So in remote viewing, the way remote viewing works is that the remote viewer is blind to what they're going to remote view in order to keep the data very clean. And then we'll use multiple remote viewers, and then we'll cross-corroborate the data between the viewers to build a picture of what is going on. Now, with alien stuff, you have to be able to trust the person that is wanting you to view it. We call that person the tasker. You have to be able to trust them because as a remote viewer, you don't want to be sent to really, really negative stuff. Sometimes we will go in and purposefully view very negative things in order to change them, because we'll use a type of remote healing / influencing in order to remove threats. So now, when you're remote viewing something negative and it turns its attention towards you, now for me and the team that I work with, when it turns its attention towards us and it feels negative, we move into a place that's defensive, and the purpose of us viewing that would be to influence and change the behavior of that by bringing source energy in order to just, stop some violation that's going on. Now, with good ones, it's no problem. I mean, those are the fun ones. Those are the ones where if they notice you, which they quite often do, they will kind of poke you back. And not just that, you can have a visit, like a literal visitation experience it can be dark ones as well. I've had visitation experiences where dark ones have come and visitation experiences where good ones have come. So it's like you become a conduit, you become part of a broader community of beings that exist in a conscious way. I mean, we all are, but most people work that in the realm of their dreams or in their subconscious. And I think it's extremely beneficial and really important for us to begin to bring this to the conscious awareness so that we can actually take control of some of the interactions that we're having.
It's very interesting you mentioned influencing. Do you usually do that at current time events, or you do that in other times?
It can be at any time.
Oh, perfect. Because I've been doing that through what we generally call the Akashic records. Okay, yeah. Sometimes we have, but it's not like we're going to a place, we don't know where we're going. We have someone who is it's another life of someone we are dealing with, and we know we have a situation where we can influence people in that situation, and we have like a group of 10 people, and each one is influencing one of the characters in that story.
Yeah.
And we can change the story. So, but the whole process is, it feels completely imagination. We cannot prove usually. Sometimes we do, but usually we just cannot prove. So it can be, the whole thing can be a dream. You can experience as a dream or something like that. But I've been explaining people that changing timelines, that's the way you do it. You influence the decisions people will make in that timeline, and everything happens at the same time. So the life you had in the Middle Ages, let's say, it's actually happening now.
Right.
So you can change it right now.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the stuff that we found too. It's the same thing. Now, as far as proving it goes, like I have a remote viewing methodology that deals with changing environments and situations. And obviously, it's causation versus correlation when you get to these things. But we've applied that to terrestrial situations, like Earth 3D situations, put viewers into it, and have worked these things where you can see changes occur in the environment. So in a sense, it's like that is in a way how you at least prove to yourself that it works to some capacity, right? But when you get into the very esoteric and timeline related things, it becomes a little bit more difficult, obviously. But at least if you have some backup on like 3D situations that you've changed, you can pretty much say, okay, let's apply it to this thing. And we know it works here, so it probably works there as well.
Yeah, that's what I usually use. I try to find, when I'm traveling in other times, I try to find information I don't know and check if it's real. And things like that, because sometimes you're actually seeing the situation and you can describe the whole thing, whatever's going on, and then I check if it's true or not, information that I don't know. And this way I started trusting my ability to be in completely other times and places. That's how I started. And then later I said, okay, let's assume that it can always be imaginary, but it might be true.
Right. You're having a fun time nonetheless.
Yeah. You mentioned in one of your interviews, you had a lot of ET experiences, and you have like CEOs interested in the subject. You have been abducted many times and things like that. Do you think it somehow led you to work with remote viewing as a psychic spy or something, or not? Is it related?
It's all related. Since I was a child, I used to get taken out of my window. So I would be going to sleep, laying down in bed, and I could hear these things in my window. And then they would start to like lift me up and then pull me out the window. And then I would end up in the field below my house at 2 a.m. and have to make my way back into the house. And so this would happen when I was a kid. I didn't know what it was. They scared me. I didn't tell my parents because it was just too weird. And so later on in life, when I saw, Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, and he's got the gray alien face on the front cover of the book. When I didn't know anything about aliens, and when I saw that book sitting there, I completely freaked out because it was the same beings that would take me when I was a kid. So I think that what it is that these beings, they'll use people for different purposes. And my life has been set up in such a way as to be a communicator, to get to the place where I am a communicator and I'm a storyteller to a large degree, to relate the stories of remote viewing, to get people to come into it and change consciousness. And these beings, they notice that stuff. And that perhaps, you know, when I was abducted, they were driving me into that as well. Now, I don't trust them, for one thing. So ultimately, I don't know what their end game is with me. I just try to keep them away. I mean, those are some of the ones that we will go after when we're remote viewing in order to get them to change their bad behavior towards humans. You know, any being that has to subdue your mind in order to do things to you, it's not
the best approach.
Yeah. So it could be related. It definitely could be. Yeah.
Did you ever try to remote view your experiences to know exactly what they were doing with you?
Some of the experience, yes. In the past, I had remote viewed some of them. It was a lot to do with genetic manipulation. I wasn't so much on the, you know, there's some people who are on the breeding side. There was a little bit of that, but mostly it was like genetic manipulation, as well as like turning me more in the way of spirituality and being psychic for whatever reason. So, yeah.
Do you think that remote viewing would be a way of therapeutical way of getting your memories back? Because people usually go to hypnosis to remember exactly what happened. Do you think that remote viewing would be another path to get to the same results?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of difficult to, if a person had an experience and then they wanted to remote view their experience that they had, it can be a little bit difficult to get into that place because, for one thing, they're always going to be blind, and if they do that session, while they're doing the session, they're probably going to realize that it's them with an abduction experience. And while it's going to bring back edges of memories, they're probably going to like have a little bit of a breakdown.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can have other remote viewers.
Yeah, exactly.
Experience and give them information on it that can trigger something as well, which is typically the better way to go. But you have to be careful, because the remote viewers have to be careful, because what happens is that these beings that have abducted them can take notice of the remote viewers and then come after them.
Yeah, true. Wow, not an easy situation, no. Right? Wow, true. Did you ever find humans who noticed your presence?
Not necessarily. There's been times in remote viewing people where so normally something hits our subconscious, and most people don't believe what their subconscious tells them. So they'll just push it back and forget about it. And there have been times in remote viewing where I've hit people's subconscious and it's made it to their conscious mind, but they don't believe it. So they just drop it, right? It's not a difficult thing, though, to notice a remote viewer. I see ghosts, right? I can feel them, feel their presence, and see them. And when somebody's remote viewing you, at least for me, the way it works is that I feel it tingling on my back of my head and my back. And it's the same for ghosts, too. Like when a presence comes in, that's usually how I feel it. And then I'll know there's something there. So what I'll do is I'll close my eyes to see what it is. I get a visual of it. And when I do that, the focus on a remote viewer tightens up and gets very pointed, and I can see a human face, and I can see the body that the consciousness is connected to. And then I can identify who it is. Now for ghosts, it's not so much like that. It turns into these sort of like fleeting images of them, their life, and it's not so focused.
Wow. Because for me, the way I started learning was accessing someone else in another time, let's say in the past, and then having that person noticing me and looking at me and saying, "What are you doing here?" And then I said, "Hello, my name is Thais. I'm here representing your other life, and I'd like to talk to you." And then have this conversation, and I said, "Well, wait, if I'm talking to someone who's in what I consider past, for that person, I'm in the future. So if that person can do that, I can do it too. So wait a minute, this whole linear time thing, it doesn't work that way."
No, it doesn't. Well, that's interesting because, okay, so that's not necessarily remote viewing. Now you've got a lot of energy behind you in order to manifest or be there, right? More so, because remote viewing, the remote viewer is going between sensing and feeling and writing stuff down. So they're like constantly going in and out and back and forth. So they're not like focused in such an extreme way as to fully pop in front of another person. Now, there was, this does happen though. So one time, and I don't know if anybody saw me or not, but one time we were in a house and we were all training. It was a bunch of us remote viewers and we were in training. And we all had monitors. So there was a remote viewer and a monitor. And the job of the monitor is to keep the remote viewer going in the session and then ask them questions later on. So in this session, I'm going back and forth between a house on fire and a person in the house kind of freaking out and running around. And then the other aspect that I was going back and forth on was this other subject in a room that was rounded. It had like metal girders and they were looking at maps and looking through scopes. So I kept going back and forth. I'm writing it down, monitors talking to me, and I'm writing it down and sensing it. And then finally, this is probably like an hour into it, the monitor tells me to, okay, go to the house. I want you to pretend you're the person in the house, and I want you to go to the door, open it, the front door, and go outside. So there's where I stopped doing the paper and I just went into me, and I closed my eyes and I actually stood up and I went to the door, I opened the door, and I walked outside. Now, in that moment, I started running in place and I saw a whole city on fire, and I knew that I was in Dresden during the firebombing in World War II. And that was what I was viewing too. After I got feedback, that's what it was. So I knew where I was. I was running down the street and I started yelling, I'm in Dresden, I'm on fire, I'm on fire, I'm on fire. So when I stopped doing that, I had burn marks all over me. For about 15 minutes, I had burn marks. Now I'm convinced that if somebody were there and they weren't running from the fire as well, they would have seen some ghostly subject running down the street screaming. But that was because I went inside myself, as opposed to going back and forth between the paper. Yeah.
I don't think that I usually manifest as a ghost in a body.
Yeah.
I usually feel I'm a ball of consciousness, an orb, pretty much.
Right.
Some people notice that. And they start talking to orbs.
Right. Exactly. I always talk to orbs.
Yeah, and say, "Hi.
I know.
How are you?
What do you want?
Are you a friend or not?"
Exactly.
And things like that, right? Because sometimes they're not.
They're not. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a few questions on things you may have remote viewed with the team. So I'll just say a few things, and you tell me if you ever tried to remote view them, because everybody wants to know about them, like the event, the solar flash, and the financial reset, New Earth, and things like that. Did you ever try to remote view that?
There's a lot of this whole lore around something happening that's destructive, that's coming from the sun, from space, and disrupting our way of life here. We actually saw that a long time ago, around the year 2000, because we had been looking at that kind of stuff way back then. It was crazy times back then because, not only were we, dealing with counter-terror stuff and like, I don't know, bad covert groups doing stuff to us. We're also dealing with this gray alien that would come and give us information on things. And he would literally show up in the middle of the night. And he mostly showed up at Prudence Calabrese's home, and he would leave like footprints on the bath mat. And when he was there, like the whole house stunk like rotten oranges and diapers. Like if you had a trash can full of diapers and rotten oranges, that's like the scent that they have. And so he would give these messages all the time. And one of the messages that he kept putting out there was something called the big event. He kept saying it over and over again, but he would never say what it was. So we remote viewed this big event. And the big event was literally, there was a mishap in our atmosphere that caused it to go to sort of a 0 point energy state, which caused it to this rolling explosion through the atmosphere across the whole Earth, which resulted in basically everything just, dying here, and very quickly. So at that same time, you had other remote viewers that were talking about the kill shot from the sun, right? So we were getting a different aspect of this because we were mainly focused on Earth and the atmosphere. And it was something that humans did in order to protect. So it was kind of like this situation where humans launched some rockets up in order to block something that was coming at us. Could have been anything. And it caused a big problem in our ionosphere that caused this explosion. So it was an accident to begin with. Now it's like future stuff. When you remote view future stuff, the future stuff can always change. Like future events can be shifted back. It can have aspects of it that'll start dropping away. It can have other aspects that come in. And especially when you bring remote viewers into a situation, it's like the double slit experiment where the observer affects the outcome of the experiment in physics, that remote viewers will affect the outcome of these events. So I thought, like when we were remote viewing it, it would have already happened, but it hasn't happened. Now, these days, when we remote view like potential future events like this with the sun, we still get something happening, like maybe 5 years out from now, up to 5 years out from now, where there's going to be massive earth changes, oceans flooding, tsunamis, problems with the atmosphere, that kind of thing. But I don't worry myself about that stuff. I'm not a doomsayer in general. To me, it's like every moment is joyous. Every moment is incredible. And that's the only place to actually be, rather than always thinking about what could happen.
Wow.
Now, yeah.
Interesting. Yes. I've been once through a hypnosis session, and I was asked that. And my answer was something like a catastrophic event will not lead to the evolution of consciousness. So it's being prevented. Yeah, you're saying? And then I said, well, when I went back, I said, isn't it better for the evolution of the population and the planet if something catastrophic? It may be a sudden change, but not catastrophic.
Not catastrophic where it's all wiped out. I think that type of event is always on the edges of the books somehow. It's kind of like always a potentiality of happening. But on the other side of it, humans get so worked up over what the future may or may not be that they'll also want to focus on that kind of stuff, And I think that I don't think that's a very good way to live, personally, because there is actually nothing going on. All you have is this moment.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's because we have a lot of memories of catastrophes, and that's a way to program us to create the next one.
To create the next one. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll get to the questions here. Anne was saying that if you know something that supposedly blocked the remote viewing beyond 2012 that happened in the year 2000, is it, Anne? Is that it? Yeah. So something happen around year 2000 that blocked everything? I think you're referring to the looking glass, right? With trying to find out what would happen after 2012, and the results from the Looking Glass project was timelines would collapse into a single one, and ascension was guaranteed. Did you find something like that in the year 2000?
Okay, so, all right, so we had this handler, and so a handler is somebody that you deal with in intelligence, and they ask you for things, and they help you on certain projects. And he came to us once, and he said, some scientists are doing something or have done something that may not be good, and we need you to check it out to see what they did and if anything actually happened. Because he couldn't tell us what they did because it was classified. Mm-hmm. And we had no classification, nothing like that. So we looked at it, and it was literally about melding timelines together, collapsing timelines together. And it was something that didn't look very good for an outcome, because it was like mating two things together that shouldn't come together. And so I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but humans had forced this together in a way that shouldn't happen. And after that, I had the distinct feeling that we should be over there, but now we're over here. And there might have been something else that happened later on that cleaned it up and brought it back together, because I know that there are other beings outside of humans who are working on removing these negative influences that humans have done to get things going back in the, I don't know, more higher vibrational direction, I guess you could say. One of the weird things also that happened was that, so I can always sense the future. I can always sense whether something's going to happen or not happen. It's really easy. It's always been something like that for me. Around, I'd say, 2012, I could no longer feel like what was going to happen unless it was super duper close to me in time. Oh. Like I could usually sense many months out, up to a year out, and always be correct. But when I would sense out, I could never feel it. And to me, what it seemed like was that there was so much like stitching and shifting of time that it just, you couldn't extend yourself out that far. And it's still there today. It's very bizarre. And I know other psychics that had the same reaction and still have the same reaction.
Would it be the time people say we would be sort of blind and we would have to navigate with blindfolds or something like that?
Yeah. What's that from? Do you know where you hear that?
I remember reading about it like before 2012 in many different places, like predictions that we would have a time. It was usually associated with catastrophic events, but I remember reading that we would be like in dark places and we would have to move around. And I interpret that today as we have to navigate this moment with our intuition, with our heart.
Yeah.
Because we're blind to, because everything manifested, we have lies all over the place. Right. So that's, for me, that's the meaning of being in the dark.
Right. Right. That's great. I like that. Yeah. That's excellent.
The interpretation I gave to that.
Yeah.
So we have a question here. How do we know if what we access is our imagination speaking or if we actually access remote viewing? Oh, you answered that already. You check with different remote viewers, right?
Yeah, it's not just that too. So when you get into remote viewing training and you learn how to do it, you get what we call tasked on like things out in the physical world. I mean, eventually you can remote view all sorts of weird stuff, but in training, you really want to stay on the physical stuff so that after you do a session, you can get feedback and look to see how you're doing and notice in your sessions what's on and what's off. And so that's how a person becomes really confident in themselves that they can actually do it. And then they'll start to take steps into places that other people would call imagination. And they will know based off of their past experience what's real and not real.
Oh, that's interesting because I never tried to do that, but that's a good suggestion. I'll try to do it because I'm usually focused on solving people's problems, and it's usually emotional, and I go to the source of the problem, wherever it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can we be attacked in dreams?
Yeah, absolutely can. It happens to me. It actually happens most of the time when I leave my body. I'll leave my body at night and then beings will come in sometimes and attack my body. I've woken up with black eye a couple times or a bloody lip, and it's been literal attack by some other being. Yeah, it's not happy time. No.
Yeah, not nice at all.
No.
There are questions about, for example, Nibiru. Did you ever remote view the Anunnaki, Nibiru, and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Nibiru, inside of me, I've always been skeptical of the story that people have of Nibiru coming. And with the way we remote view, we usually, when we write up a tasking for a remote viewer, we come from something that's known first. So in the case of Nibiru, what we would do is if there was something coming towards us from space and people are claiming it's Nibiru and that there are photographs of this thing, then we remote view that particular thing. Okay. And we have not yet come across anything that is coming at us. Now, it doesn't mean that something's not coming at us. It just means that we have not yet seen that, if it's out there. But now, Anunnaki, absolutely, yes, there are Anunnaki, absolutely. We've viewed them quite a bit. We like Enki and Enlil and those types of beings, viewed them quite a bit. And they are real. They're more like these, the humans put them into this mythological category and responsible for certain things, but they are beings that have been in existence for a while because they're a different race. And they've had a lot of influence on humans and the directions in which humans will grow. And in fact, when you get to a lot of these old stories of like Enki and Enlil, and then you go into Ra and the Eye, or you go into Osiris and Horus, or you even go into some of the Norwegian mythologies, they're all the same. They're all the same. Yeah. They're all pointing to these singular groupings of individuals or beings that were influencing and creating part of the Earth construct.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because I remember once ancient Egypt is a time I can easily access, and I realized at some point accessing another life. The first thing that puzzled me was that I was looking around and saying, "Why is everybody so short? What's going on here?" And then I understood that my position in one of the temples was when people say today, the God, whatever God, Egyptian God, it's more of it's not exactly a person, but it's a position.
Yeah.
And the person can change.
Exactly.
It's like a job.
Right.
You know, your job at that moment is to be the God, whatever.
Right. Right.
And it's kind of a job. And I assume that in Northern mythology, like Thor is a job.
It's a job. Exactly.
Something like that. And maybe Shiva too, you know, are different jobs with different people playing that role in different times.
Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, they're all, but it's like, they're all the same. I mean, all of these beings are, okay, so here's the other thing too, is that this comes from like way previous Earth times where there was this central thing going on here on the planet, and it looked like it probably happened somewhere in Europe in the Alps region, where that whole mythology was playing itself out. And then as that culture broke up and people started moving across the world, they took that with them to try to explain what happened back then.
And if they were dealing with people who could travel in spaceships, those beings could travel around the planet and show themselves and continue with the mythology.
And right? So mythology.
You see the God, you give a different name, but the persona was the same.
Right. So, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've seen this with ancient civilizations when we remote view them. Mm-hmm. I mean, so this planet has gone through so many renditions of different cultures. And it's so weird right now to me that we're so isolated. I mean, we're not isolated. It's just we're made to believe we're isolated. But in these previous cultures, it was normal to have spaceships coming in. It was normal to be connected in. And in fact, this is how most like other planets and solar systems operate, where beings are going back and forth between other planets and helping other beings on other planets. But here, it's gotten strange to me here. It's not
kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
Because we're somehow confined here or something like that. Yeah. Anne is asking, how long does it take to become a good remote viewer? How much training you need?
Well, it depends on the individual, for one thing. It's like playing an instrument. So some people can get so good that they can play in the orchestra, right? And some people, you know, may not ever get there, even though they practice a lot. So normally, though, with remote viewing, I would say about a year working on it on a very consistent, strict, disciplined basis would likely get somebody to a state where they can be used for operational type things. And operational is, I'm talking about like paid jobs and really being able to figure things out. For, you know, the person who's the hobbyist, you know, one thing that happens with remote viewing is that when a person first learns it, they have a very high skill level. It's really high. And the reason why is because they don't know, their conscious mind can't figure out what's going on. So it can't really try to control it. So I would say after 4, 5, 6 practice sessions, when they first learn, they're like doing really well. Then all of a sudden, boom, they crash and burn. Total crash and burn. And most people give up at that point because of all the shame that they feel, you know, and they can't understand why all of a sudden they're crashing and burning when they were so good before. And the reason why is because their mind was out of the way, their thinking mind. As soon as their thinking mind tries to take control of the situation, the ego, which it inevitably does, it always wants to, that's when you actually begin to learn. But most people give up at that moment when you actually need to start learning. So, you know, you have to get through that part. You got to get through the part of like, oh, I feel so bad because now I'm really horrible at this, so I'm just going to quit doing it. So.
Great.
So
1 year, okay, Anne?
1 year.
1 year.
Did you recently remote view something about the battles on the moon and on Mars to know if they're over, or are we still,
Oh no, this stuff is always going on. It's always going on. I mean, it's not ended to any degree that I've seen. Do you have you probably don't have night vision goggles, but
no, I don't.
I have night vision goggles, and I will lay in the backyard at night and watch the sky.
Mm.
You would be amazed at what is going on up there. I've seen ships flying and shooting stuff. I've seen like battles occurring up there, and we've tasked on some of these things as well. What was that? Well, we've seen like Americans in ships fighting, like with anti-gravity ships outside of the atmosphere with other beings. And I mean, you have physical proof of this. And if you're looking through goggles, or if you're filming through goggles, and as well as that, you have remote viewing data. And this is recent stuff too. So there is something going on. There is still something going on for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
So guys, night goggles, okay? Next purchase. What's your thoughts about Atlantis? Do you have some hint from remote views on the Atlantis of light, or of the fall of Atlantis? Or both?
We were looking at, we've mostly looked at the fall of Atlantis, as opposed to like what it was beforehand and who set it up and who was there. So we've looked at that specifically a number of times, and a lot of what we'd seen was there was a devolvement spiritually within the culture, where they were doing a lot of strange genetic experimentation, but it had gotten to a point that it was beyond what should be done, as well as they just lost connection to their own divinity to a certain degree. And what we saw was that there was this piece of divinity or God source that came in that tried to remind everybody. And so it was like this being came, and the people that noticed it could see it, but others couldn't see it. And that precipitated the end or the destruction of that land to go into a different evolution, and that those beings there would recycle and reincarnate into Earth life and kind of play out their Atlantean story until that they can come to some type of resolution with it.
Wow. Was that some sort of Christ consciousness?
It was some kind of Christ consciousness, but it came down in a pure form, like a pure form of crystalline light energy, as opposed to like a person or a being. Mm-hmm. And see, this is the thing. So humans will not trust like things that are not human. They will either place them in God status or something else. So these beings have to reincarnate into our cycling right now for the mass majority to begin to believe them and the light that they carry and the teachings that they bring. Otherwise, people just won't believe them. I mean, if you had a light being come down in the middle of culture right now and explain things to people or give them energy, most people would just treat him as a god again. And that's not what's supposed to happen. That's not what's supposed to be. So, yeah. But in Atlantis, they were able to recognize that, and it was okay to do, apparently, back then, because they wouldn't end up treating it as a god, because they would internalize the experience and grow from it.
Mm-hmm. I have crazy memories from the fall of Atlantis. I remember the feeling I had was that it was like the big one, the earthquake that will sink California.
Yeah.
Everybody knew it would happen. The fall of Atlantis would fall. And people knew it, but it didn't have a date. You just kept this feeling. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. But you didn't know exactly when. And after a while, we started feeling it was closer and closer. And the whole society was very dark.
Yeah.
Consciousness was very dense. And I wasn't like one of the important people there, but I started doing something like smuggling objects and people out.
Yeah.
And hiding them in a cave.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
But I remember it was very dangerous because people couldn't find out I was doing that. And it felt like a Star Wars movie, the Empire in the Star Wars movie. It felt like that, the society at that point.
Well, I mean, that's what we saw too with remote viewing, that it went very dark. I mean, it wasn't just like genetic experimentation, it was straight up bestiality.
Yeah, it was, the whole society was like, oh my God, the best way to survive was to hide your light. And I started to like hiding things.
Right.
Like people and things. So people would suddenly just, someone's appeared. Oh, my. Don't know what happened. And things like that. So that's how we saved some of the technology, some of the people that survived the fall, but just like very few people.
Yeah.
Did you remote view any interaction between the Anunnaki and Atlantis, or in Atlantis?
We didn't, but we did see that there was connection with other star races with Atlantis, at least like in the earlier days of it. It may have somewhat left near the end, but in the earlier days, Atlantis was definitely connected into other star races, and it was a public thing. It was like on the surface. It wasn't like it is now for us. But I don't know who they were. Like in remote viewing, we don't. If somebody's remote viewing aliens, they don't necessarily get a name for things, because a name is this high-level concept. Remote viewers describe. So they'll describe the physical descriptions of these beings, but they won't necessarily describe or give them a name. Yeah.
Oh, and there's a question here. Did you get the location of Atlantis? Was it in a specific place? Different colonies?
No, we didn't get a location. That's also another thing that, unless we use dowsing, so remote viewers will describe things, but they won't like necessarily get. So we can do things like, the Richat structure,
the Eye of the Sahara, right?
The Eye of the Sahara. So we've looked at that to try to understand what that used to look like. And it was actually, that wasn't Atlantis. We looked at that. That one was something that was a big mining pit, a very ancient mining pit. This is like past Earth cultures. And they had slaves mining this area for specific things. And there were aliens involved in that as well, as far as the mining goes. So we'll look at like locations of collapsed structures under the water to remote view what they used to be like. But we've yet to find anything that is Atlantis. But at the same time, it kind of doesn't matter too much, because during Atlantis time, there was lots of different cultures here that were very similar to it. It wasn't just that. For whatever reason, Atlantis like floats to the surface of our consciousness right now. But there are tons of other like lost civilizations that have been actually well documented through photographs of structures under the water. So, I mean, we don't know where it is. We don't know.
All right. I think that's it. You have courses on remote viewing and you have your channel. So can you tell the public where can they find you, your courses and things like that? And if it's online, because we're in Brazil.
Yeah, right. Yes, they are online, and you can find it at righthemispheric.com, my website, under classes. And I'll be teaching coming up, I think it's September. I've got a class coming up. And I'll be speaking at a conference next month, Corey Good, Ascension Summit. And Michael Sala will be there, so I will definitely ask him about Artemis. I'm sure I'll hear about it. And doing I've got a book, Time Before the Secret Words, kind of a biography of the early days of remote viewing. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Do you still have the show Psychic Spy on Edge of Wonder?
Yes, that is still running on Edge of Wonder. I got to mention that. Yeah, 2 seasons on Edge of Wonder, Chronicles of the Psychic Spy.
Great. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So, bye-bye. Thank you.